would like to say a couple of words about the Lily and Nathan Ackerman Chair. This program has been an important part of the School of Public Affairs now for more than 10 years. And what this program does is to bring us two things. An Ackerman Chair, that is a person who is appointed to a lecturership in the School of Public Affairs, who coordinates coursework and delivers coursework around the program themes of social justice, and a series of lectures, one in each of 2 terms, that focus on issues that are of particular interest to this community and that serve the question of advancing in public policy environments in particular, questions of social justice and sharpening those across the breadth of disciplines that constitute the body of activities that we pay attention to in the School of Public Affairs. And it is in that context that I am particularly pleased to bring to the podium Rosalind Engelman, the daughter of Lily and Nathan Ackerman.
At the opening of your beautiful library, I remember being told that over 140 different languages are spoken by the families of Baruch students. This made a tremendous impression on me. And I remember thinking to myself, only in America. We're not perfect, but only in America. My grandfather came to the United States from Russia, where he was a soldier for 15 years, from the age of 15 to 30 in the Tsar's army. He was lucky because, being blonde and blue-eyed, some Russian soldier took a liking to him, and he became sort of the slave of a Russian soldier. And when he didn't shine boots well enough, or he didn't do his commands quickly enough, he was beaten. World War II, which to many students is like studying the Civil War, I realize, had many of my family as soldiers. And a cousin was a flyer of B-17s, and he came, Lieutenant Schultz, to see Grandpa. And he looked at him as an officer, and he said, "I'm so proud of you. How often do they beat you?" And my cousin said, "Grandpa, they don't beat you in America." And my grandfather said, "Only in America." And that's where this phrase that I grew up with comes from. Today on television, I watched Barack Obama speak in an 11th century edifice, reconstructed edifice, where only 3 people had spoken before who were not British. And those people were the Queen, Nelson Mandela, and who was the third one? I can't recall right now. And once again, I thought to myself, only in America, because he mentioned that his Kenyan grandfather had been a cook in the British Army. So perhaps if there are students here, one day you will represent the United States abroad. And once again, someone will look at you and say, only in America.
In all of the cacophony of the immigration debates, in all of the polar positions, and all of the entrenched arguments, one of the things that Dow Myers has done so eloquently and so routinely over the course of these last 2 decades is to offer us ways to think about thinking together, to combine those things that we all hold dear and recognize our mutual interest. His 2007 book on Russell Sage Press, Immigrants and Boomers, talked about that in numerical terms, where he pointed out how important it was for all of us in the baby boom generation, guilty, who are thinking about retiring, also guilty someday, might just want to think about how important it is not only to permit the notion of immigration, but to invest in immigrants as, in fact, the guarantors of our future stability. Since that time, he has not only sustained that work on economics and demography, he has also thought very carefully and consistently about language, the language that we use to frame the immigration debate, whether somebody is illegal, whether somebody should be thought about principally in terms of his or her documentation status, and the polarization that some of that terminology creates. Is there a different language? Dr. Myers thinks that there is. And so I ask him now to the podium as our Ackerman Lecture for the spring of 2011 to help steer us through the numbers and the language of immigration in America. Dr. Myers.
Well, thank you, Dean Birdsell, and thank you for everybody who's here late in the afternoon. I have to say, I'm coming here from Los Angeles. We think that we're the most diverse city in the nation. We also think we're the center of the universe. But I also have lived in New York 5 years in a prior existence, and I do know about New York, and I will confess that really New York truly is more diverse. You have more different kinds of people here. LA is diverse, but it doesn't have all the Caribbean nations, doesn't have all the African nations that live in New York. So you are more diverse. But we have bigger immigration troubles than you do. We're the center of the universe when it comes to immigration problems. We're the home of all kinds of citizen resistance because we're the home of the initiative where you can vote in very demagogic ways. And we're still trying to figure out how to overcome that. It's led to our fiscal collapse as well. One thing we'll talk about is the divided opinion and the fears about immigration. And I'm going to allege to you that the prevailing myth out there, or prevailing narrative, is constructed out of old data. It doesn't apply anymore, but it's kept alive because it has really good political purposes for people who believe in it. And I will give you my dissection of the 5 cornerstones of myths about immigration in America. And then I will then suggest to you that we can rediscover a timeless model that has been skipped over, that is the only true model that works in every nation, every society in the world. We've skipped over it. And immigrants fit into that in a nice way once you see it at the end here. So the key here for finding consensus, my title, The Keys, is you find consensus on immigration only by looking ahead. Basically, people are arguing about the past. And they want to go back to the past. And yet immigration reform is always about the decade ahead, or 2 decades ahead, because we only change immigration laws in a major way every 20 years. So it has to be about what's ahead, not about the past. And so we really have to look forward. And when we look forward, there's some really obvious conclusions that we arrive at. I believe, and I think you'll believe too, because being a demographer, I like to always take my little pot shot at economists, who are really, economics is the most important thing in many ways. But economists can't predict the future very well. They can't even tell you interest rates 3 months ahead of time. Demographers, however, know a lot about the future, because we know that 20 years ago, you were 20 years younger. And 10 years from now, you'll be 10 years older. And these are all things that you can count on, and you can build on those. Politically, it's a really good basis to build on. And it really changes our outlook on immigration when you look ahead in that most simple way. So let me talk to you first about the divided opinion and the fears. These are data from California. A lot of my evidence is from California. I also compare some New York and national data. This is a great survey conducted by Mark Baldessari, Public Policy Institute of California. This is the 1998 data, and I'll show you the 2004 data in a second. The question was, on the whole, would you say immigrants are more of a burden or more of a benefit? This is the percent who say more of a burden. And you see that the liberals, 40% think that immigrants are a burden, and conservatives, 54%. As you might expect, there's a little bit of a difference there. And by 2004, it changed a little bit. The liberals lightened up. Only 29% now thought that immigrants were a burden, and the conservatives went the other direction to 64% thinking they're a burden. It's like they went opposite directions. It's like they're watching different TV shows. They're reading different newspapers. They're getting different information, but that is a polarization in America that we know about, and it opened up in just 6 years' time. The good news here about this widening divide is that it is so recent, according to these data. And anything that's recent, I think we can undo in a short period of time. If this division had existed for 30 years, I would be really worried. It'd be deeply entrenched. I don't know how we're going to fix it, but anything that comes up fast can blow over fast, potentially. So there's hope to undo it. But here's where we are in the immigration debate. We have a standoff. And the country is divided roughly 50-50 in terms of on many issues about immigration. There might be a slight majority, but there's not an overwhelming majority. And the people in the middle can be persuaded to go either direction. On the one hand, we have the strict enforcement folks who really want to argue for, really strict enforcement. They don't want to cut any slack, and they really want to demand the laws, as they see it, be enforced, and they don't want to make any concessions of any kind. And then on the other side, we have immigrant rights advocates who believe that immigrants are people who have rights and they're important and they should be respected. And they're going head to head here. And neither side is really prevailing right now. This is why we had this logjam. I think there's a third position, which is to ask the question, are immigrants, are they wanted and needed? Now, I think if you ask that question, it's related to each of these other groups. The immigrant rights people say, yes, we want them. The strict enforcement people say, no, we don't want them. And the debate could be on a moral level about rights versus enforcement, or the debate could proceed on a more utilitarian level of do we need immigrants or not. And I am of the mind that we should try the latter approach because it has the potential to break open the impasse. Now let me just go, I skirted around this one issue in my book. I didn't want to talk about illegal immigration because I thought illegal was a bad way to frame the issue. But finally, I think I'm ready to talk about it now. I started it this spring at a law conference on justice at USC, and I'm going to share this with you. I think it's about illegal. And the word illegal, I put it in big red letters and italicize it. What does illegal mean, though, really? It's not just about enforcement. What does it mean? Well, it means technically unauthorized. People aren't illegal, but their entry could be unauthorized. And we use illegal as a shorthand, and journalists then begin to call all immigrants illegal. It's a synonym. It's amazing. Their language, they slip up and they start referring to illegals and immigrants are the same. So the word is really, it's corrosive, but it means unauthorized. But what does it really mean? I think what it means is this. In social terms, I think it means not invited. There's social change going on, and we did not invite this change. And older folks would not like to have the change. They say it's not wanted. And at the bottom of it all, they say immigrants are not needed. To which you might reply, I hope, not needed? Are you kidding? And I say, yeah, not needed. Let's talk about that. What about not needed? Because if they were needed, then you would want them. And if you wanted them, you would invite them. If you invite them, you'd find a way to authorize them. And what's this? Illegal, it just goes away. Illegal is a construction. Depends on whether we need them or not. So let's talk about needs. Now, there's old and new stories here. There's lots of facts, and you can throw out many individual facts, but I'm of a mind that it's really about the narrative you put together, the overall package. That's what people buy into. It's a story. And there's a prevailing story, which is very pessimistic, and it basically is designed to lead to a conclusion of just say no. Just say no to everything immigrant. And I think there's a counter story which says, well, let's see what works well for all of us. All of us. So here are the myths. I have 5 myths. I'll just show them to you briefly, and then we're going to go and dissect them. The number of immigrants is accelerating out of control. Most people would believe that's true. Immigrants are all newcomers. They all start that way, at least. Immigrants are like Peter Pan. They're never changing. The longer they live in America, they never get older. They never adapt in any way. They're just frozen in time, like newcomers. Immigrant children do not deserve services. and immigrants are an unwanted burden, especially given our fiscal crisis. Now that last line has a lot of punch right now. That can trump everything. We can't afford anything that we don't like. We only pay for things we do like. So those are the 5 myths, and I'm going to show you that these are actually outdated. They don't describe the present. They don't describe the future. So is immigration accelerating out of control? Well, what is the evidence on that? Here's data for the traditional gateway states. What I'm showing here is the percentage increase in the rate of arrivals. And I use 1980 as a starting point. And from that point forward, in the US, we had a pretty substantial rise of 100% or more of the number of newcomers each year in the US, up to 2000. And since 2000, it's gone flat. My data here stop in 2007 because I wanted to stop them before the recession. In the recession, it's really dropped. But the trends I'm trying to describe are not based on the recession. This is just the general trend. It peaked, and it's gone flat, and it's declined a little bit. And the traditional gateways, New York peaked in 2000 and dropped more steeply. And you can get these data from the American Community Survey and track how it's changing each year. California peaked in 1990. We had a really bad recession in the 90s, and that stopped us earlier. LA County is now drawing less newcomers than it had back in the 1970s. It's really slowed down in LA. LA used to be the immigration capital of the country. I have a report we put out last fall that looked at this, and we compared in this, I'd never do this, but in this one report, we compared it LA and New York. It was interesting. And New York was the longtime immigration capital. But in the 1980s, LA surpassed New York. But since then, LA has slid back down again, and New York is still the king. It's still the capital of immigration because of the slowdown in California. Texas boomed, and it went flat also. And Florida, where I'm from, born in Florida, is still rising, but Miami, where I'm really from, is the blue line there. Miami's dropped off since 2000. So the part of Florida that's growing is really Central Florida and North Florida, the southern part of Florida, not South Florida, but I meant like the southern region, the Georgia part of Florida. The red dirt part of Florida is where it's growing. So that's for the traditional places. Now here's the new destinations, and you see the U.S. the scale has been changed here. The U.S. is there for comparison. I mean, North Carolina and Georgia have gone through the ceiling. Arizona is skyrocketing. So there's huge changes in some parts of the country. The traditional areas have slowed down, but even in North Carolina and Georgia, you see the immigration is no longer accelerating the way it was. And the nation as a whole, it's slowed down. What's the importance of this? Well, if it's not accelerating out of control, if it's level, it's a problem that can be dealt with. If you imagine it's accelerating, you think it's going to go on forever, it scares the pants off people. They think immigration is out of control, and that's what they react to. Not what it is today, but where they think it's going. So this trend is very important. Immigrant restrictionists will tell us, however, that we're at record levels of immigration. They tell it to you again and again. Record levels, well, maybe it was record levels back in 2000, but it's not anymore. It's no longer accelerating. It's at a steady state, and a steady state is manageable. We're doing some projections right now of future population with immigrants in the population, broken out in detail. And we had to figure out what will be the future level of immigration. To do that, we ran a Delphi process, an experiment this spring, where we asked 10 experts to give us their opinion anonymously of what would be the trend in immigration. The left-hand part of the line here is the actual trend of immigration, showing the peak and the fall in different data sources. And then we ask them, in the future, how many immigrants will there be in 2015? How many immigrants will there be in 2025? And these little tick marks are the different people, different individual scholars. What did they say? And you'll see there's quite a wide range of opinion. But basically, the average is that people think we're going to go back to where we were at the peak, but almost like 95% of the peak. That's sort of what they expect in the future. So immigration is never going to surpass, according to this opinion, never going to surpass what it was in 2000. We've We have reached this steady state, it looks like. Now, in California, the way this plays out politically is that we've had growing immigration. This is the percentage of people who are new arrivals. And by new arrivals, I mean who've been here less than 10 years. And that's through 2000. And here are people who are longtime residents. Now, I'm going to show you more of these data in more detail in a minute. But the total height of the bar there is the percent foreign-born of the whole population. And so there's the newcomers, and there are the old arrivals on top. And people see this growing foreign-born takeover of the state, and they imagine this takeover is going through the ceiling. And so the word takeover is what you see from that trend. But in reality, it hasn't worked out that way. It's actually leveled off. All the data through 2000 and 2010 show it flat, and our projections look more like this. So the future immigrant population is not accelerating through the ceiling. It's leveled off. It's a steady state. Our newest projections have it a little bit higher than that, but it's still pretty flat going forward. And here is the actual percent foreign-born and all the data we have for California and the U.S. And you can see the annual data. It has leveled off. This is, it leveled off before the recession, and then since then, we're waiting to get the 2010 data. You know, the census used to include data on immigration, but they stopped asking a question. We have an incredible shrinking census now. It's only like 6 questions. They don't ask where you were born. You can't tell they're born in California or New York or where. You just know that their race and their age and their sex, and are they a homeowner or not. That's about it, I think. There's not much else in the census. I'd love to know how many immigrants there are in California, but we'll have to wait till 2010, and data will come out in the fall here for a survey. So the point being, we think it's going to be pretty flat, maybe drop off more during the recession and come back up a little bit. It's not accelerating out of control. Are all immigrants newcomers? I've already given you a preview of that. Here it is for all the states in the nation. At the top of the bar is the newcomers, the bottom of the bar are the people who've been here since 1980 or 1990 or 2000. New York is the highest bar over here on the right. In the Northeast, Texas is the highest in the South with Florida, and California is the highest in the West. And so the foreign-born population is layers of old arrivals with new arrivals on top. That's how it gets built. It's layered. And the old arrivals are definitely different from the new arrivals. They may have started off the same, but you know one thing, if someone's lived here for 20 years, here goes my demography rocket science again. If they lived here for 20 years, what do you know about them? They're 20 years older, 20 years longer established, 20 years deeper roots, and they're not like newcomers. And I'm going to show you some data in a minute that dramatize that. Here's the layers in LA City. And you can construct this for New York. It would look very similar, I think. We have a declining share of the population that's newcomers, and we have a growing share that's old-time immigrants now. It used to be all the immigrants in California were new because immigration was a new thing in the 1970s. And now it's becoming an old thing. And LA is looking more like New York with a more mature immigrant population, which is much more successful. Here's the percent of Latino immigrants that are newcomers in all these different states. You see South Carolina out here is an interesting state, politically significant. And in South Carolina, 60% of all the Latinos are brand new. Whereas in California, it's like 18% are brand new. So if you're an average South Carolinian, what do you think immigrants look like? They look like newcomers. That's all you've ever seen. These new destinations, by definition, have new immigrants. And they assume they're going to stay that way their whole lives. They don't know they get older. You're supposed to laugh. They don't know that they advance themselves economically because that's so obvious to New Yorkers, and it's obvious to Californians. In new destinations like South Carolina, they have no experience. They don't know. All they know is what their political leaders tell them. And the political leaders tell them myths. One advantage we have, I was listening to the sheriff talk this afternoon about his his outreach, the new immigrant program, a new immigrant outreach program. And what we found is that in LA, there's this growth of old timers. It creates this helping hands ratio, we call it, which is the number of settled immigrants divided by new immigrants. Back in 1990, there was hardly any settled immigrants to help a new immigrant who showed up, help them find a job, help them get an apartment, help them learn the ropes. Look at these ratios. That's for the whole state over there, and here it is for individual ethnicities. Every ethnic group we looked at, it's the same dynamic. We have all these old timers around. It's an incredible resource that we're not used to thinking about how to use it. How do we harness the social networks of the immigrant community to provide assistance to newcomers? This is one of the big benefits of having a settled population. It hasn't been used in California yet. I think New York has a longer tradition of that. So are all the immigrants like Peter Pan? Well, here's some recent data for the whole nation, and it shows that on lots of indicators, they rise dramatically the longer they're here. A couple things don't change. They don't change very rapidly with getting a college degree the longer they're here, and they don't change with moving into a professional occupation, which depends on a college degree. The reason being that an immigrant who shows up at age 25 can't really afford to go back to school because they're supporting their family. They just can't do that. So they don't really change their education. But despite that, look what happens to their income, look what happens to their home ownership, and look what happens to their citizenship. These things go up. Now, for their children, it's a different story. Their children can do all kinds of things because they're in school. Here it is, this is just education. This is just looking at, looking at English proficiency. And what we have here is basically the younger you are when you come, the more likely you are to be proficient in English. Everybody knows that fact, but it just shows the difference that it makes. The parents may not progress as rapidly, but the kids sure do when it comes to an early start on education and learning English. Now, my favorite variable is home ownership. It's been my favorite for a long time. My dissertation at MIT was written on home ownership. And it's the American dream, I'm told, by real estate developers. But I think it's the American dream for immigrants too. People come to America and they want to buy a piece of the rock. They want to sink their anchor into the ground, and it's not an anchor baby, it's an anchor home. They're very eager to get into it. It's been traditionally the way since looking at the 1900s, early 1900s, immigrants were very active in home ownership also. But it's not apparent to people at a moment in time because the newcomers show up, they're not always economically in good position, and they don't buy houses right away. So what we have to do is we want to look at 1970, 80, 90, and 2000, and look at newcomers, and then track them in the census each decade and see what happens to their home ownership. How much does it go up? This is for the whole U.S. And here's people who were new in 1960, and over time their home ownership rate rises dramatically. Here's newcomers in 1970. Here's newcomers in 1980. I'm going to guess. So the ones that are new in 2000 now, where do they start? Oh yeah, same place. But that's for the whole U.S. That includes Oklahoma and Georgia. That doesn't include New York. That doesn't include California. But we have those data too. So here come all the other states. There's California and New York. Same dynamic everywhere. Immigrants start off at the bottom, and it's like a skyrocket going up. Talk about upward mobility. The most astounding number I have in all my census research is the percentage of Mexican immigrants in California who become homeowners. And we're a high-priced state. Mexican immigrants, who are among the poorest of immigrants on average, what percent do you think become homeowners after 20 years in California? Now, I got to tell you, the state average is 56% homeowners. Most people can't afford to buy a house in California. 56%. Mexican immigrants, after 20 years, 51% homeowners. Now, they're not buying the fanciest house, but what I tell people in California is that that mansion in Beverly Hills is supported by a pyramid of lower-level homeowners buying at the bottom. They come at the bottom and they push prices up, and the mansion rises in value because of all that immigrant workforce that's living in blue-collar homes that they bought and they invested in. They're using sweat equity. They're doing their own home improvements. They may be doubling up with friends and their relatives, but they're buying homes, by God, because they're buying into the American dream. And you never hear this in the immigration debates because it does not support the prevailing narrative that says, just say no to everything immigrant. It doesn't support the narrative that say immigrants are failures and that they're not assimilating. So you won't hear this. It's silent. And the interesting thing is the immigrant advocates, the people who are promoting immigrant rights, they don't say it either. It doesn't support their narrative either, because they're not interested in this question. But isn't it interesting to you? I think it's phenomenal, and it's astounding. Now, we've gone through this recession. I'm really, really anxious to get new data to find out what does the homeownership rate look like. On average in California, it went down 1 percentage point from 2000 to 2010, just 1 percentage point. And I know it dropped more for young people. From other data, I can tell that. But I really want to see the details by immigrants, and we haven't got it yet. We're waiting until this fall to find out more, how well immigrant population survived the incredible downturn. Now, to really drum home the Peter Pan fallacy that people don't change, I just had to raise the specter of Samuel Huntington, the late, great political scientist from Harvard University. And he published a book, Who Are We? And he mistakenly decided to have a chapter in there about the Hispanic threat to America. And all the academics have all beaten up on him. Everybody's agreed that he's wrong. But I just thought I would graph it out with real data. It's not a matter of opinion here. And I think he illustrates the problem, because he's assuming something. He is actually expressing the Peter Pan fallacy that immigrants don't change. Ooh, sorry. It's a really gloomy view. And his view is that there's this cultural bifurcation, and that California is the epicenter where there's growing Spanish takeover of America and English is declining. And he says, he points to my hometown of Miami and Southern California. So I took offense to this. And we invited him to come to LA, but he wouldn't come. But basically, he says that new immigrants are arriving faster than they can assimilate. And it's really going down the tubes. And so I thought, well, I got data on that. Let's see what it looks like when we graph it out. Let's see where we go with this. And so I'll just skip through this quickly here, but he thinks that Spanish use is an indicator of anti-assimilation, and it's a cultural threat. So we're going to measure that. And I'm using some other data. I've got data here, first on projections of, well, what percent of the population is going to be Latino in the future? And according to, I'm going to look at age 25, 34. It's a key age group, I think. And in 2030, 10 years from now, or no, 19 years from now, no, how far is that? 19 years. 51% are supposed to be, of the whole state, is supposed to be Latino. So that means, aha, they're going to all be speaking Spanish. And okay, we can work with those data. So those are the demographic data. And now I have some survey data on language use, which I got from Roberto Cerro and Pew Hispanic, back when he was there. So he's assuming that more Latinos, that means more Spanish. But here's the actual data from Pew, and it shows that for 3 different generations, among the foreign-born, very few people are English dominant. English dominant means that in the survey they say they prefer to use English. And Spanish dominant, they prefer to use Spanish. And the bilingual people could go either way. That's the first generation. The second generation, heavily English dominant. And the third generation, almost totally English dominant. And the big threat is that Spanish disappears. This is the 3-generation theory about language transition that pretty much all the sociologists agree about. There's no dispute on this. These are just the data. So I combine these data with the demographic data, do my demographic calculations, and I can then show what percentage of the people will actually be Spanish users in the future compared to today. But I have one more piece of information, and that is I actually know the generational breakdown in California from our own projections that we've developed. And so the thing is this, that just because there's 51% Latinos, those are not the same kind of people as we had before. Because in the year 2030, they're not newcomers anymore. They're 3rd generation, they're 2nd generation, they're long settled. It's a different mix. The same people now grown older, longer established, and the grandchildren of immigrants. So Latinos are not all immigrants. Some of them are grandchildren of immigrants. So this is the calculation. We use these data, we combine them, and here's the result. One line, I dash it, it's just rhetoric. I can't quite figure out what the number is. It's just rhetoric, it sounds big, and then there's a number I can calculate based on the numbers he uses, and it looks like that. I think that's his reasoning. So the rhetoric is more extreme. There's the reasoning. And my calculations, based on the demographic data and the survey data, it looks like that. That in the year 2030, the Spanish use is going to go down among the Latino population because too many of them are third generation by that time. Too many are second generation. And so he's sold the whole story based on the assumption of Peter Pan. Nobody changes. They're frozen in time, look just like newcomers their whole lives, even in the third generation, which obviously is not correct. So is he right? No. All right. Now, what about immigrants? Children don't deserve services. I kind of added that probably because of the conference here. There was a theme about services, and well, you would think that's a stupid question to ask, but politically it's powerful. These are the rock-hard data from California, constructed by Ron Lee at Berkeley. He's an economic demographer. And what Ron Lee has calculated is the age per capita payment of taxes. Who pays the most taxes? People age 50. They have the highest tax payments. They're at the maximum earnings power, and by God, they should pay the most taxes. And who consumes these taxes? Who do we spend the money on per capita? Different people. Different age group, young people, children. And the people on the right there, some of them are kind of grumpy who are paying all these taxes, and they don't like those kids who are taking the taxes because two reasons. Well, they don't like them because it's not them who's getting the taxes, and they give them a bad name. They call them tax eaters. There's the good people are the taxpayers, the bad people are the tax eaters, but the nasty part about it is there's an ethnic division. Because the older folks tend to be non-Hispanic white. The younger folks are heavily Latino. And there's a split. They don't feel any kinship. They're paying high taxes and it's going to somebody else's kids, and they don't feel any kinship with those kids, and they resent it. And they want to cut taxes because they don't want those tax eaters to take all their money. I don't think I'm exaggerating. I think this is the fundamentals of politics about taxes in California. It's an ethnic split, and it's based on age and generation. So, do children deserve services? Heck no. I guess not, in some eyes. Who the children really are is in dispute. It turns out that I did different ways here. There's the birthplace of the children. Most of the children are native born. There's a small number of children in LA who are not native born. The great majority born in California. They're homegrown. But we sort of mythologize that they're immigrants. And they're all illegals. And there are some who are undocumented, unauthorized, and illegal, some, but it's a small number. Most of them and so all of them are being stigmatized by this threat of illegal. Illegal is used as a weapon to justify cutting off the spending for all of them. And we do that in California. We cut off the spending for all the kids, despite a few. I did a regression analysis. I'm not going to show it tonight, but we tried to look at the survey data I showed you before about the burden and willingness to pay taxes and support school bonds. And I added one more variable, which is, do you think immigrants, immigrant variable, are taxes being wasted, and then should immigrants get services? And if they said no on immigrants getting services, that led to 9% lower vote on the school bonds for all the children in California. Talk about cutting off your nose to spite your face. 9% lower. That's, when a ballot is only passing at 51%, 52%, you lose 9%, you've sunk it. And so it's a serious concern that there's this misunderstanding about who are the children of California. And I don't know if you have that here or not. But what we have is something new in California that we dredged up demographically was this new discovery that never been talked about before. We discovered that we passed a new threshold. Always before in California's history, our residents were all migrants that came from someplace else, and lots of them. And so we beat them away with a stick because there's too many migrants. Ever since the gold rush, everybody's come from somewhere else. And in 2000, we crossed the threshold. We didn't even know about it until 2008. It took a long time to figure that out because no one had asked the question. We hadn't analyzed the data that way. But we apparently, for the first time, a majority of California residents are homegrown. They're not from another place. You can't beat them away with a stick. They grew up here, and we're totally dependent on these kids. And whatever these kids turn out to be, it's based on our investments. It changes the political dynamics. It's already showing up in a lot of the political writing, this new realization that we're a homegrown society, not a society of migrants. And yet other people will still use the migrant label and the immigrant label to characterize all the kids, because that means you don't owe them anything. You don't have to, they don't deserve services. I think that's the implicit story. But the homegrown, we think, turns it around, that you do owe them. They're your kids. They grew up here. They're native sons and daughters of the state. Now, we've built some population projections to try to show this. And this is the age profile from 0 to 85. On the right is California born in other states. And here are immigrants who came in different decades. The earliest arrivals are older. The newest arrivals come later. And this is California's population in 2010. And here it is in 2030, the same format. You can see there's a big growth here in the green zone. The California born is starting to really dominate more and more. At young ages in particular, it's huge. 90% of many of the younger kids. And so it's a new era politically, we think, in California because of our sense of ownership. And the demographics change the ownership sense. So now I come to my biggest point. Are immigrants needed? That was where we started, right? With the illegal question and not invited, not wanted, not needed. Are they needed? Well, let's go find out. It's not about immigrants at all. It turns out this is like the magician trick. It's not about immigrants. It turns out it's about the rest of us, especially those baby boomers. And I get to talk about the baby boomers a lot. I'm not guilty about it. I do it a lot because those are my people. I get to talk about them. Here is my senior ratio, I call it. It's the number of people 65 and older divided by working age, per 100 working age. The important thing about it is the senior ratio has been flat in the US, flat in California. I'm pretty sure it's flat in New York. It's there in every state. And being flat for 40 years, what does that mean? It's invisible. It's totally taken for granted. There's no change. It's nothing. We've ignored it. We're asleep at the switch. And what happens this year, everybody? First baby boomer was born in 1946. It's a bipartisan movement. You all know who our leaders are in this, I hope. On the left, William Jefferson Clinton, born in 1946. And on the right, George W. Bush, born in 1946. The two of them leading us across the precipice of age 65. And the Census Bureau press release also told us, along with them goes Dolly Parton, Sylvester Stallone, I think Donald Trump's in there, all kinds of famous people, not me. But I'm soon to follow behind. And here's what it looks like when you actually do the ratio going forward in time. This is a picture of a tsunami. Now, I want to make a point clear here. Many people use tsunami in a very trite way. I use it in a very literal, metaphoric way. A tsunami wave isn't actually that high. Actually, many tsunamis are not any higher than the ceiling in this room. If I'm out in the water, I get the speakers of California here. If I'm out in the water and I see a wave like that coming, the first thing you do is you swim out toward it and you try to dive under it. You got to get past the wave. And once you're under it, you're okay. Big wave goes by, and you go, "Whew, that's a big one." And you survived it. But a tsunami is different. The power of a tsunami is not the height. It's that it goes back from the beach 1.5 miles. And so when the first baby boomer hits the beach, there's 18 years of baby boomers behind it. They keep coming and coming. You've seen the videos in Thailand. You know what it does. That's the baby boomer tsunami. Okay, you're all squirming like, "Ooh, man." That's a baby boomer tsunami. It's a big deal. And no one's talking about it. There's no political leaders who are willing to talk about it, and I'll tell you why. Political leaders have maybe John can correct me. I just invented this by watching them. They never, ever mention a problem if they don't have a solution in their back pocket. Until they have a solution, they won't acknowledge it. Because they're afraid the press will say, "What are you going to do, Mr. Mayor?" And then Mr. Mayor can't say, "I don't know." You can't say that. He has to always have an answer, whoever they are. Every politician. I've never seen anybody who will. So they got no solution to this. You can't stop aging. They don't have a solution. And so they ignore it. And they've been kicking a can down the road forever. The Reagan administration identified the problem, and they said, "Well, not in our term of office." And George W. Bush's administration, the President's Council of Economic Advisors, their report had it in there. They don't call it the baby boomer tsunami. They don't use the senior ratio the way I do it. They don't animate it the way I do it. But it's the same idea, and it's what drives the fiscal deficits. The Medicare, the Social Security, well, let me show those. It drives all these problems. It's a big increase. The smallest increase in the country, by the way, is Oregon, 50%. That's the lowest increase I could find of all the states. So here's the crises. You all know these. You have all these retirees. You have to replace the workers. You also have to replace the key taxpayers. Now these people become beneficiaries over 65. They're not paying taxes as much as they were. And you also have a home seller crisis, which I discovered. Because it turns out one thing that older folks do is they sell homes. And who do they sell homes to? Younger people. And it used to be imbalanced, and now it's not so imbalanced anymore. And I'm a homeowner. It makes me itchy. I get concerned. I mean, you have to wonder, who are you going to sell your house to? I mean, really, seriously, who's going to buy your house? And we used to always ask that question rhetorically in California. These prices are so high. I can't imagine anybody would want to buy your house. You're still here. I can't believe anybody would want to buy your house. Well, yeah, that's right. Who's going to actually buy your house? There's not enough people, and maybe not the right kind of people. So, I've done some calculations, but I'll show you those in a second. Here's the responses that are going to happen to this. These are likely responses. I think most economists agree about this is all going to happen. The reduced growth in GDP is in the president's report of both Obama and Bush's administration, both had that. Delayed retirement, that's already in the works. Reduced or delayed benefits, it'll happen. Higher taxes, it's got to happen. Greater reliance on immigrant workers, already happening. And the bottom line one you may not have thought about before. That's why I painted it green. This is the one good story. Once you see that baby boomer tsunami, you go, we need more workers. Who are we going to get? And the prime set of workers we have are the ones that are already here today in school, and we've been neglecting them. We have not been cultivating the younger generation the way we should, because we need all hands on deck right away, please. And you got to plan ahead. You can't make it work overnight. You got to plan 10 years, 20 years ahead. And we can see the data. Let's go. And the clock is ticking. But the good news is that minority youth are going to be rediscovered, and they're going to become the precious asset that's going to save America. But nobody's talking about that way. It's really important. They are the only good thing I can see in this scenario. So, can immigration help? What about those immigrant workers? How about them? Well, it depends on which narrative you buy into. There's the first narrative here is the strict enforcement narrative. And they've taken some preemptive strikes on this one, and they say, no, that aging thing is ridiculous. Immigrants get older too. Yeah, it's true. They do. And they want to brush it aside. There's another argument from the rights narrative which says, whether immigrants can help, it really shouldn't matter. They have their own intrinsic rights, and we shouldn't be talking about it that way. It doesn't depend on whether they can help or not. And I can understand the moral argument there. And then there's the third narrative, which I made bigger because I want to talk about it more. The our needs narrative, which says, heck yeah. I mean, when you calculate these numbers, you can actually figure out that they can help us. They don't solve the problem. But they can solve the problem by about 1/4 to 1/2. And here's my calculations based on Jeff Passell's projections. In his own report, he said it didn't really help much. But when I did the calculations, I figured it out that, no, it helps. It reduces the problem by 1/4 or 1/2. You still have to do other things. But in that context, why would you ever want to chase away some DREAM Act kid who went to school here, is well-trained, ready to work? Why would you chase them away in the context of this? We've got an emergency, and they can help. They can help better than anybody else can help. I'll skip over this. This is that we have the quality of the workforce has been a problem, but I don't have time for it. I'm going to move to conclusions. I think you get my point. Let's go to the 5 myths. Here's what they are. Every one of them's wrong. So what about the first one? Accelerating out of control? It's actually a level, steady state. We can deal with it. It's not a problem. We're managing it. It's not accelerating out of control. Are they all newcomers? I don't think so. They're really more long settled now. They were newcomers before in 1990. It was true before, but today they're long settled, and the long settled ones have all these big advantages of being upwardly mobile. Are they assimilating? Yes. Hugely rising achievements because the longer they're here. And then what about the children deserving services? Are you kidding? You're investing in those kids. Those are the future workers and taxpayers. And take that seriously. In the light of the baby boomer tsunami, we really need immigrants to help us balance the senior ratio. Now, I'm not advocating opening the borders and admitting huge numbers of additional immigrants that we already have. I'm advocating that we really cultivate the people we got, who we've been neglecting and not taking seriously, and especially their kids. And I think that we can make a lot more out of what we have, and down the road here, we might want to decide to admit more. But first off, we have to realize what's at stake here in the bigger picture of things. We really need to turn the demographics from a problem into a solution. All these things are happening here, and we can actually make it work together. It's part of the solution, not the problem. And ultimately, it comes back to this generational partnership that we've lost sight of. And I'm not quite sure how we lost sight of it. It's being very short-sighted. But basically, these people down here at the bottom are in the prime of life, and they are paying maximum taxes, and we thank them for that. And their taxes are going heavily at the state level, and the city level, they're going to the children. The federal level, they go to the older folks. And we're glad they're paying those taxes. But when they invest in those kids, it's not rocket science. Just add 20 years, and those kids grow up and become the workers and taxpayers and home buyers. You get back what you put into it. The studies I've seen from the Federal Reserve say you get back 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 on your investment. If you invest in a kid who had never gone to college before in his family, nobody had gone to college, it's like an 8-to-1 return on investment, meaning you get that much more income and taxes back for the money you put into helping them. But you got to pay it up front. You got to invest up front. We can't think ahead very well. This cycle of life, though, is pretty predictable. We should be able to talk about this. And I think it's a cycle of roles. Everybody changes roles over time. At any one point in time, we're separate. We have different interests. Over time, we all change roles. You can count on it. It's really the cycle of life, and that's what we need to get back to. And immigrants come in. It doesn't matter what ethnicity people are. We need more kids. Today in America, we're losing kids. The new census, the big finding, in California, we lost 10% of our kids. LA County lost 20% of their children in one decade. You can't afford to lose kids. We need to get more kids ready to get trained up to be workers because we have a lot of older folks who aren't going away. And so it's a big deal. Thank you. Do I have time for some questions?
Given that the DREAM Act failed just in December, and the president's speech in Texas reintroduced in some way the conversation, and then shortly thereafter it was reintroduced, how do we get the folks that fell short of that vote to fundamentally understand that, to your point, we've already invested in these young people? How do we just make it happen so that they can now invest in us?
We have to get them to not focus on the kids themselves. That's the problem. They've been focusing on the kids and saying, you're not deserving, and you're a lawbreaker. That's what they're saying. So you have to turn the conversation and be, well, let's focus on the rest of us. They don't want to do that. And no one's putting the focus on the rest of us. It doesn't get brought up. I've talked in public audiences a lot on this issue, and what I find is that in progressive audiences, people are surprised by a lot of the facts I bring to bear. They've never heard them before, and that to me was alarming. But then in conservative audiences, I know they haven't heard it, and I can't get in front of them. So that's my biggest challenge, is how to get into middle America. That's where it really needs to go, and I don't know. But I was really happy to come to New York, because I know you guys are not middle America, but you're the center of the world. That's why I wanted to come. It's the capital of the world. It will help to get out of my California box I'm in. I think New Yorkers are far more progressive on immigration, and the problem is that you talk to each other and then you don't realize that it's a national political issue being controlled in South Carolina and Kansas and places that don't have any experience, and this message, I don't know how to get it to them. I'm ready to work on it. If you have ideas, I think that's, but don't focus on the kids. We've done that enough, and having kids come up to the microphone and say, oh, please, it makes me cry, but it doesn't. Other people just get a hard shell, and they won't listen. That doesn't work.
You've clarified something that to me was a kind of an observational mystery. I always thought the cities were overrun by immigrants were New York, LA, all cities that to me were desirable places to live as compared to the cities that were not overrun by immigrants or where immigrants did not want to go to. And I think you've made it very clear why, if there's probably one thing worse than being overrun by immigrants, is not being desired by immigrants. And I think we're very, very close to kind of slaughtering the goose that gave us the golden eggs, right? The desire for people to come, we're killing it with all of our enforcement. And I think you said that we do immigration policy every 20 years. Maybe my reading is that we're kind of doing it every 10 years. We did 86, that had kind of an amnesty. Then we did 96, which was all stick, no carrot. And then we're due, and I'm kind of glad we didn't do 2006, because Lord knows what that would have been about. But we're in a point, and what I want is to see if I can borrow your demographic skills as a predictor and apply them to the policy context. And can you give me your sense of where the pendulum is? In my own personal opinion, I think the Giffords incident in Arizona was kind of the tip of the anti-immigrant pendulum in that direction. Is that, you think, correct? Where do you think we are in terms of the country's ability to absorb your argument? And what do you think may need to happen for more of those, not in New York, but elsewhere, to be able to begin to absorb your argument? What do they need to see in front of them that may provoke an aha moment? Is that like a big retirement figures in the local newspaper? Or what evidence elements do you think American people generally need to see to let the demagogues, off to the side, and then to really begin to think analytically about this issue?
Wow. Well, you're pushing me a little bit out of my league, but, fools rush in, where they shouldn't. The Giffords thing really is an interesting turning point about hate speech, and it's. We'll see what happens there. She's an urban planner, by the way, from Cornell. No, it wasn't advertised a lot. And so her staff member who was killed was a son of an urban planning professor in Arizona, too. So I got a little bit involved in the Arizona business. The big problem is the recession and the high unemployment. As long as you have high unemployment, no one's feeling generous at all about anybody new. And the crisis we have isn't workers today. It's workers that we're going to need in 5 years. And so the problem is getting people to realize that we need to invest in the kids today so they'll graduate from high school and be able to work in 5 years. That's the problem. So I think that the unemployment rate we need to have it come down. And when it comes down, you can build momentum to go forward. Thank you all.